Taxi!
Okay, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
You know, one of the big issues that I think is super important as we head towards the midterms is the MAHA movement. It's the largest chapter in my new book, Trump 2.0, because I look at myself as like the typical MAHA type voter, somebody who I think tried to make decent choices based on what the government and doctors were saying. And what I've seen over the last year is this awareness, this level of transparency about what's actually happening with our health and our wellness, and in many cases, cover-ups that have existed. And I've just been fascinated. And as we head towards the midterms, there's a big question, frankly, how much should we be talking about the MAHA movement? What should we be saying? What should we not be saying? And in order to break this all down, I want to bring in somebody who was MAHA before it was MAHA. Jennifer Galardi is the Senior Policy Analyst for Restoring American Wellness at the Heritage Foundation. Jennifer, thank you for being with us. Obviously, as I said, you were MAHA before it was cool. But several of us, including myself, are now riding this wave. When you look at the issue and its manifestation in the last year and a half, give us a grade where you think the MAHA movement is and what it's accomplished since Trump took office.
Hello, first of all. It's always weird to just jump right into it and be like, hello to your listeners. Thank you for having me. It's like, I love working in this space because, like you said, I was in it as more of a practitioner and a peddler of MAHA ideas before it hit the national scene and hit politics. So I love talking about it. One of my favorite things to do, and I get to work on it, so it's great. As I mentioned to you before, I think I would give it a B+1 because I don't grade on a curve. I'm not the easiest of graders. I think kids need to toughen up a little bit more these days in many ways, physically as well. So I think we've had great success with closing the grass loopholes. I actually was just reviewing an amendment to the bill.
What's the grass loophole? Explain to listeners right now. When you say closing the grass loophole, what does that mean? Right.
Has nothing to do with marijuana. It for the old school grass people. Yeah, no. Although that is an issue as well, but sticking to the FDA standard, it's generally recognized as safe. And initially it started as pretty innocuous, a way to reduce legislation for foods such as baking soda, butter, cream, things your grandmother would have in her pantry. That's kind of the common analogy. Like if your grandmother used it to bake, it's typically fine. So it was initially proposed to not have to run those through the traps of a lot of legislation. But as food became more processed, food companies kind of used it as a loophole to just introduce these chemical products into our food. Things like you have mentioned also before you turn over a protein bar, things you can't pronounce. Monodisaccharide, all those 20-syllable words that are longer than the LGBT.
Are you saying that monosaccharide just isn't safe? Yeah. Are you saying?
It's like the dinosaurs, right? It's like Tonorana Rex or whatever. Anyway, so things like that kind of, what it did is it allowed the food companies to self-proclaim safety. So it didn't have to go through any thorough research on the FDA's part. The food companies would say, hey, we've tested it. By the way, it's safe. Okay, you're great. And that's how, instead of now potato chips having, actually, that's not a great example because even those typically are just some sort of oil and salt and potato chips. But instead of ice cream, right? Do you remember when you had ice cream in the 70s or the 80s? It was cream, butter, cream, vanilla, non-fat milk, just salt maybe. And now it's all of these, again, ingredients you can't pronounce. And so it's one, to enhance the flavor profile. They put these things in there to make them more addictive. I even notice when I have, I'm trying to think of I will use potato chips because there's a brand called Vandy that is making potato chips with just
of course,
potatoes.
I love them.
Yeah, I think it's avocado.
There's 3 ingredients.
Yeah.
No, it's salt, potatoes. They use oh my gosh, you're catching me off guard, but they are the sister company of MAHA chips.
Correct.
I used to have this
that
down, but yeah, I have
3 ingredients. Yeah.
Right. And I have these all the time, but I always get a kick, Jennifer, when I talk about grass, right? Generally recognized as safe, because again, we're basically saying that we're putting stuff in your food that's generally and I joke with people. Can you imagine getting on a plane and the pilot saying, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. The plane is generally recognized as safe. You'd be like, I'm getting off this thing right now. And yet we allow this in our food.
We've done a cursory check. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I just, there's, when you stop and think about the idea that for decades we've allowed, the government has basically said, we're just going to allow this stuff. And that's what it is. It's stuff, chemicals in your food that we're going to say are generally recognized as safe. And everyone goes, okay, there's no other facet of life where you'd agree with that. But I just want to, so aside from that, like what else do you think, if you look at the MAHA movement and stuff that Bobby Kennedy and Dr. Oz and Jay Bhattacharya, like what else has sort of, you said, wow, that is unbelievable that or I'm just proud they got that done in the first 16 months.
Flipping the food pyramid.
Flipping the food pyramid. Yeah. I mean, think about this. That was, you and I have talked about this in the past, but like South Park had an episode like 10 years prior where they were like, what if we just flip it upside down? No one actually thought that was
They're seriously profits. Because, what's so funny is, though, it's common sense. It really is common sense. Eat real food. And that's the other big win, I think, that has nothing to do with policy, is its messaging. All of a sudden, people are talking about the things they would never have talked about before, metabolic health. And it's not just Kennedy. It's a whole movement of Callie and Casey Means. You have Dr. Oz. You have people that are now almost pseudo-celebrities because of the government positions they hold. I mean, Oz was kind of a celebrity before. And it's interesting the amount of attention on this. I think that is a huge win. I think their graphics, the way they've designed the websites, that speaks a lot to getting the word out. Like I mentioned to you as well, like everyone's like, well, Michelle Obama's My Plate isn't that much different. First of all, it is on many levels, but it fell flat. No one remembers a plate. People, whether, they will never forget the food pyramid because it was just ingrained into everything that came down from the USDA for so long. So let's keep that, but flip it on its head. Very smart.
100%. All right. So let me, speaking of flipping it on its head, let me flip the question on its head, Jennifer. Sure. What is it that within the MAHA movement that you were hopeful would get done that hasn't?
This is where my B+ comes in, but I don't think, and I didn't give you a grade, but it's a B+, because I think there's always room for improvement. Yeah. I think there's always room for improvement.
Definitely not taking your class, by the way. I'm not Jennifer Galardi, not taking the class. I'm not going to Heritage Foundation for my diploma because you're clearly a tough grader. But so what is the issue that is giving you the B+ instead of the A?
Well, I think we have to be realistic, right? We've had some wins, but we've also had big challenges. One of those is
like what?
Vaccines. Tried to kind of switch it up, and it hasn't polled well, according to some polls. It depends on the poll that you look at. The general kind of popular polling is saying don't touch the vaccines. That's the message that's coming, that the administration is getting. People are too squishy about it. It's too much of a divisive topic. And it's interesting because, we started out well, like, oh, well, maybe not everyone, people are skeptical of the COVID shot, which is actually not a vaccination. It's mRNA technology. And I thought that maybe that would open the door for more curiosity, more doubt about this childhood vaccine schedule that has 80 some shots on it. But I don't think people are ready yet. I don't know why. I kind of do. I don't know if you know Aaron Series' book. It's called Vaccines Amen. And that amen tells you everything you know about. It's a religion for people. I don't understand why they don't want to question it. Maybe it's the mental roadblock of this is the Trump administration, right? The TDS. Maybe it's just because.
Do you think that big pharma? Do you think it's because big pharma's got so much money invested in this that they've basically said, hey, we make a ton of money off of this, and we got to make sure that no one undermines that?
Oh, sure. Well, they had the 1986 Childhood Vaccine Safety Act that provided them a liability shield, so people can't sue the vaccine companies.
Yeah, but they also make a ton of money. So you limit the number of shots, you limit the amount of money.
Correct. So that's their incentive. But the fact that, people became skeptical of pharmaceutical companies and vaccines during COVID. So I thought maybe that would I know what their incentives are, but I thought there was enough shenanigans going on that people would be a little bit more open-minded to changing the childhood vaccine schedule. But we saw what happened when Kennedy tried to reform the ACIP. Now it's completely disbanded. There's just a lot of headwinds there. Like you said, the headwinds are the money, right? But I think with enough political support, it's hard. You ask what the headwinds are, it's the money. It's the money in big ag. It's the money in big food. It's the lobbyists. We saw that Cassidy was so bought and paid for by the pharma company. He just kept going. He was one of them. That's the other roadblock, is some of the people in Congress that just, hair on fire, vaccines. That's their thing. So that's going to be a little tougher. And again, though, we've only been at this a year and a half. So
right. That's the thing that
barge around in a day. We didn't get here overnight. It's going to take a long time to undo some of this stuff, or at least override.
I got to be honest with you. I wasn't entirely surprised you said that, but I also thought one of the big issues that folks in MAHA are really disappointed for is this glyphosate. Okay, and an issue with what the administration do. Can you just, for viewers who are like, what's glyphosate? Why is it a big deal to MAHA? Can you kind of give us a 101 on that?
Sure. Glyphosate is essentially weed control. It's what people know mostly as Roundup is the brand name. It's a general category of pesticides, which includes insecticides, rodenticides, fungicides. It kills weeds. It was a way to stop tillage for farmers. Massive tillage that was harmful to the land. And it did replace other things that were worse, like paraquat, like some other really strong chemicals. So the EPA is supposed to review these things. I think it's every 15 years. It was up for a review. It kind of got stalled. It hasn't been reviewed. And there is sufficient data, enough so that Monsanto, who is now owned by Bayer, ironically, a pharmaceutical company, has been sued and has lost litigation for claims of cancer, mostly non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And that is in cases where someone is exposed to it in direct contact, like a farmer or somebody who's working as a groundskeeper or an area where it's being sprayed. Glyphosate is used in construction zones to kill weeds before they develop. It's used everywhere. I've done a really deep dive on this for what we call a background report for Heritage that will hopefully be ready soon.
What if I just kill weeds in my driveway? Do I need to worry about that?
That's the thing. Well, they have Roundup stopped using glyphosate. This is the problem when you say, oh, get rid of glyphosate. You don't know what's replacing it. So in 2023, Bayer Monsanto stopped putting glyphosate in residential use products as Roundup, but they've paraquat's back in there. So you always have to ask the question, what's going to replace it? I see the biggest problem with glyphosate. Like I said, when I did the deep dive, there was an increase in glyphosate used as a desiccant, which means it's used to dry the crops right before harvesting because it speeds up the time you can harvest. It increases productivity. And because so much of our junk food now has some of these grains in them, I'm thinking, again, this is my gut instinct. I hate to pinpoint it to one product, but it's cereals. Because as a desiccant, glyphosate is only used in a small percentage, but it's all used on rye, barley, wheat, and oats. What's in cereal? And how much cereal have people been eating since the 70s? How much have we moved away from eggs and bacon to processed food, cereal?
So when people, if that's their morning routine, they get up and eat cereal, should they be questioning that?
I would. I mean,
okay. So let me just get back to the question, because I don't mean to get off chart. But
that's okay.
But why is there concern about how the administration is handling glyphosate? You said that Monsanto / Bayer isn't using it in the residential. Why? What is the ruling, or what actions has or has not the Trump administration taken on glyphosate that's gotten people in the MAHA movement a little upset?
Trump issued an executive order, essentially kind of providing a liability shield. Bayer Monsanto is seeking this every way they can, legislatively, in the executive branch, in the Supreme Court, there's a case, and saying he wants all glyphosate production moved from China, which is where most of it is, to the United States. I understand that move, because for me, if something's being manufactured in China, how are we supposed to monitor it? I mean, as controversial as glyphosate is, I'd rather see it produced here, and then we can say, okay, you can and can't do this. It's very controversial.
So the idea is we at least would know what's in it, because we're doing it here domestically, as opposed to allowing China to send it to us and then having to wonder what's really in it.
Yeah, and it just allows, I think, better research on it, right? We can inspect labs, we can do all that kind of stuff.
All right. I want to turn, as I said at the outset, to the midterms. Whether it's the vaccines or whatever, there's no question in my mind that the MAHA movement was particularly instrumental in helping Donald Trump return to office. Is the MAHA movement, so let me just back up one more step. Midterm elections are base plus elections, and you need your people fired up out there, ready to go, voting, getting people to the polls, putting up signs, making phone calls. In your opinion, is the MAHA movement that was so instrumental in 2024 for the Trump victory excited for the midterms?
I think some of the MAHA movement has lost enthusiasm because of some of the setbacks, particularly around glyphosate. I'm trying to message that just because you lose a battle, you haven't lost the war. There's a lot more battles we need to fight. We need to be working on all fronts. I think they're a little disappointed by the recent news of Massey's being primaried. He was a big champion, particularly when it comes to agriculture and the Farm Bill. So I think it would be helpful if candidates could reinvigorate the MAHA voter by taking MAHA positive positions. One
like
is removing liability shields for glyphosate. So Rep. Luna created an amendment to the Farm Bill that, again, they were seeking a liability shield. She put in an amendment in there and it passed, to remove that. I think they can. Vaccines is tricky. I think you have to know your district and where your constituents stand, but a lot of the MAHA moms are not happy with that. Keep pushing on food, shifting food policy, making sure. I just saw in the store yesterday that Doritos now has like 2 brands, one of their regular nacho cheese and their ranch, that are like no dyes, so you won't get that orange stuff on your hands. I'm not so sure if that will be popular, but I think I really think it's messaging. I think policy can only do so much. The demand needs to be created. It'll be interesting to see.
But the bottom line is, you think if you're a House member or senator up for re-election, you should be leaning into MAHA, right?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's enough, like you said, you need that plus. You have your base plus that's going to get you voted. That squishy middle needs to move left or right. And I want to see that squishy middle move right. And the way you can move them right, like we saw in 2016, is through MAHA. I think you said this, and maybe you just said it, and I missed it, but I don't think Trump would have been elected were it not for Kennedy coming on board. Honestly, I think that tips the scales in his favor.
Right. No, I think, look, you wouldn't have Trump 2.0 if you didn't have the MAHA movement, and you wouldn't have the MAHA movement without Trump 2.0. The last thing I want to ask you, Jennifer, before we go, we are now on our 3rd pick for Surgeon General, Nicole Saphier. She's a Fox doctor, or a Fox contributor that's a doctor. Number one, and I'm really pressed for time, so real quickly, is she MAHA approved? And number 2, does she get the votes?
I think she's MAHA enough. I've spoken with her. She's not MAHA activist first pick. They think she was too soft on vaccines. She's too much of an establishment person. I've spoken with her. I don't agree with that. And I think you need somebody that can get through the health committee, although that's now being chaired by, hopefully Marshall is looking instead of Cassidy. So it probably have an easier go of it, not as much pushback. But politics is all about compromise, and you're going to have to make some compromises.
Okay. Jennifer Galardi from the Heritage Foundation, thank you for all you're doing. Thanks for informing us. And I think this is so important as an issue as we go forward. I enjoy this conversation. Thanks for keep coming back with us. Give us an update where we are as we get closer and closer to the election. All right, guys, when we come back, we got a lot more on Full Court Press with Sean Spicer. Stay with us.
This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer on 77 WABC.